Welcome to Strain on the Game, the podcast that reveals what it really takes to keep elite footballers performing at the highest level. I'm Stephen Warnock, former Premier League player, joined by physical performance expert Adrian Lamb. From training ground truths to the financial impact of fitness, we discuss the often overlooked challenges behind the beautiful game. Welcome to another episode of Strain on the Game. This one is a new one in 2026 where we are looking at what can only be described as a managerial bloodbath. 5 managers have gone already in the first couple of weeks, or the first week of 2026. Absolutely incredible, Lammy.
I was speaking to a friend of mine earlier this week, and I've never seen this show, but he described it as Squid Games.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says
good.
it's managerial Squid Games, isn't it? It's a bloodbath, as you said. Yeah, so yeah, I mean we've sort of covered this in an earlier episode in terms of what the ramifications and the implications of a managerial sacking on team performance and injuries and how that looks, because we've both been involved in that and both been at clubs where managers have lost their jobs, unfortunately. But yeah, this is starting to now get into what we would call silly season, isn't it? It's starting to get there.
I think the interesting thing about this one is usually managers are sacked for not performing well. So we'll just give you the managers first. So we've got Maresca, we've got Amorim, we've got Wilfred Nancy, we have got Ryan Mason. Have I named 4 there? One more.
And Jimmy Thelin.
Jimmy Thelin
and Aberdeen.
Well, that was the other one. And Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at Aberdeen, Celtic, and West Brom, you say form hasn't been great. Manchester United and Chelsea, however, this isn't. I think there's a little bit of form, but I don't think it's that. This is about press conferences. This is about slagging the club off, basically, and going down the route of, I want to get out. How can I get out?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a tale of 2 press conferences, isn't it? A press conference where the former Manchester United manager or head coach was questioning whether or not he was the manager or the head coach, and making some not very subtle digs at the sporting director and the sporting sort of structure that he works within, and another press conference where the former Chelsea manager didn't turn up and he sent Willy Caballero instead. You go and deal with these lot. So and again, you make a great point, and I think you're dead right, where this is less about results, because it can't be about results in terms of both of these managers were manager of the month very, very recently. You know, Amorim was manager of the month in October.
Yeah.
And in October, the owner of the club, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, came out and said he's got 3 years to prove himself and to bring success to the club, and he didn't get 3 months. And then Maresca was manager of the month in November. And then mentioning the Aberdeen manager, they won the Scottish Cup back in May.
Frightening, isn't it?
Manchester United got to the final of the Europa League, didn't win it, and didn't perform particularly well in that final, but still got the final. They were 15th in the league. So you can use these stats to either, condemn or to support. Depends on your point of view. But very political, really, really political.
Yeah, I think the interesting side of the Chelsea one is particularly interesting to us because it's all about control at a football club, and basically what Maresca is, or what there's been leaked since his sacking is that Maresca wasn't in control of when players were getting used, substituted. The medical staff are almost a separate department from his staff, and they advise the owners of Chelsea when players should and shouldn't play and should be taken off and how many minutes they should be playing. And I think this was aimed pretty much at Reece James, because he's so important to the football club captain. His recent injury history is poor, really poor. And so his minutes were managed differently. Cole Palmer picked up an injury, arguably their most influential player. He has also had his minutes managed as well by the medical staff behind the scenes, and Maresca was at the point where this is unacceptable. this is out of my control, and he did not like it.
Yeah, I think it speaks to an interest in evolution in the role of the manager slash head coach at a club where we've both said repeatedly that in our experience the manager is the most important person at the club. The
Yeah,
buck stops with them. I think we're now seeing that um, increasing evolution towards the sporting directors, the football directors, director of football, CEOs, creating a management structure that the manager or head coach has to fit within. And if they
mm,
deviate away from that structure or they criticize that structure and revert back to a more traditional model, then they're very quickly shone the door. you
yeah,
know,
seems
um,
that way.
I mean, it's an interesting one, the Chelsea one, isn't it? And I quite like to explore that one with you in terms of the medical department were um, were quite rightly, in my view, advising and setting boundaries around the minutes that players should be playing, probably in and around training. Now, in my experience of trying to ring fence certain things around players with a significant injury history, that is a difficult one to do because there's pushback from the coaches because
Yeah,
they want these players to play. There's pushback from the players because the players want to play and they feel great. And there's often a discrepancy between if the player feels great, well, they think I can do more. I can push on
yeah,
here. Well, the reason you feel great might be because of the not restrictions. Restrictions isn't the right word, but
the
the
management.
management that the medical staff and the performance staff are putting around you.
Yeah,
And I suppose I do risk being um, accused of hypocrisy here because I think players should push on and should train hard and should build that robustness and resilience to injury. On a general point, I think that is true, but in certain individual cases, especially where there's a significant history of injury, then players do need to be managed. They need the minutes managed and they need the
yeah,
training managed to make sure that they are available consistently. So, a 90-minute game or a full game for one player, a full game might look like 60 minutes for another.
yeah,
So it comes down to, does the coach accept that? Does he fit within that structure? And if not, that's when friction can arise. Then politics get in, and that's when upper management and front office staff start to step in and try to resolve these issues. Because if you've got a dysfunctional management staff and friction between the coaching staff, the fitness staff, and the medical staff, and a difference in opinion, and then the player comes into that as well with their opinions, then that can become really, really difficult.
I find this very interesting because the way I look at it is the medical staff who are working on behalf of the club, shall we say, and not the manager,
Hmm.
they're not going to do him a disservice because their reputation's on the line, and they've got to
Yeah.
make sure that that player performs at the highest level when he's available, and get him available more often. The issue I think that comes to light here where it sort of doesn't work is the manager needs the results now. So
Hmm.
he's thinking about the next game. He's not thinking about, let's just talk about Reece James because we talked about him before. So
Hmm.
they're thinking we want Reece James for the next 20 games. Now, if you're playing one of the top teams, you want Reece James on that pitch for as long as possible because he's going to have a better impact on that game. However, if you've got the medical staff then saying, well, we can only have him on there for 60 minutes, and the manager's thinking, I need him for longer than 60 minutes, that becomes an issue. But then that wouldn't be any different to any other staff that you'd bring in. Surely they'd give you that same information anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some experience of this and it reminds me of a time at Sunderland when I was head of performance there, and we brought in Jan Kirchhoff, if you remember from
Yeah,
Bayern
centre
Munich.
midfielder.
Yeah, good, fantastic player, really good player, and proved to be integral to to the survival of Sunderland in the Premier League that season. He came from Bayern Munich. He had a horrific injury record, a really horrific injury record. Through no fault of his own, it's just the way his body was created.
Yeah.
So we performed all of these assessments, myself as the performance staff, and alongside the medical staff. The medical staff at Sunderland were excellent, and we came up together with a plan. And basically, we went to the manager and said, "Okay, this is what Jan Kirchhoff is. You get him for 60 minutes every Saturday or every game. Okay,
Yeah.
if he plays a 60-minute game for Jan Kirchhoff is a full match. All right. After 60 minutes, if you keep him on after 60 minutes, his risk of injury increases dramatically. History tells us that, and the player tells us that, and all of our testing tells us that. So one of two things is going to happen. He'll be out of position, and you'll concede a goal.
Yeah.
He won't be performing the same way he did in the previous 60 minutes. Or worst case scenario, he'll get injured. Right. So the manager accepted that. And I said, and by the way, if he plays 60 minutes on Saturday, you don't get to see him again till Tuesday.
Right.
Because he needs that extended recovery period. So
just to interject onto that one, so how does that go down with the board who are bringing him in on big money? Is there a discussion with the board about this or not?
Might be above my level, above my pay grade at that time. But yeah, it may be. I think at that time, the manager's brought in to do a job. That job is ensure Premier League survival for Sunderland.
Yeah.
The tools at the disposal of the manager are there to be used at the manager's discretion, the tools being the players. How the manager chooses to use those tools is better. Is up to him. So is it better to have a fully functioning Jan Kirchhoff for 60 minutes every game and maintain that availability? Or is it better to have a Jan Kirchhoff who'll give you 90 minutes in one game, maybe give you 90 minutes in the second game, and then breaks down in the third game and isn't available for the rest of the season? So that's the story that was trying to paint, the picture that we're trying to paint here. And that was a success story. It doesn't always become a success story because Jan Kirchhoff, fantastic performer for Sunderland in that season, played really well, didn't get injured. It was funny because I remember saying to him, Jan, what happens to you after 60 minutes physically? How does it feel? Describe how it feels. And he said, it is like I have fallen down a hole. It's like I've fallen down a hole. My legs, I'm running through treacle. All right, okay. So 60 minutes is about it. Because, you do need to involve the player in this sort of decision-making process. The player can't be outside of the decision-making process. You can't just say, this is what you're doing. You can advise, but if you get buy-in you need to get buy-in from everybody. You need to get buy-in from the medical staff, buy-in from the performance staff, certainly buy-in from the head coach, which in this case does not seem to have happened. And then and the player needs to contribute to that discussion. So yeah, that was an example of times when this has happened to me, and it was successful. It's not always successful because sometimes the managers don't accept it. Sometimes the managers will say, no, we're not catering to the lowest common denominator. Everybody has to play. It's a level playing field and everyone's the same.
Yeah.
So, you do how you approach a manager with that and how you discuss that is a really important part of your job.
Yeah, I think what's also important now, or very interesting, one of the things that you often talk about on the podcast is that when a manager leaves or when a manager comes into a football club, the fitness has to suit the style of play, or the style of play has to suit the fitness, and etc. I'm just interested at the moment as to the appointment of Liam Rosenior, who was at Strasbourg, goes into Chelsea, but Strasbourg are asked to play the same system, the same formation, basically as Chelsea. So from a fitness point of view, that sounds like it should be quite easy in terms of how the players are trained and what they look at. Manchester United is an interesting one because we've got no idea what's going to happen there. We think it's going to be an interim manager. Does the interim manager change something? Straight away, Darren Fletcher drops to a back four, changes. The fullbacks are high up the pitch, and they've got the two sitter midfielders. So they are playing a different system, and we're just wondering how it will affect them. But one thing that happened which was very clear after the game, and I don't know whether you heard this, Darren Fletcher did an interview and he said Bruno was only meant to play 45 minutes. However, it got to 60 minutes and they were thinking, we're going to have to take him off, but do we chance leaving him on? And they made the decision at 60 minutes to take him off. They also took off Matheus Cunha as well because they felt like he was in that risk category of picking up injury as well. So from Darren Fletcher's point of view, from someone who is an interim manager, to pick up on that side of things straight away and trust his staff when he needs a victory, I thought was interesting as well. And then just to touch on the other one, Martin O'Neill going in back in at Celtic. He's already been there this season. The players know his training regimes. The staff know his training regimes. So that one also feels like that should fit quite well in terms of training and what the players do.
Yeah, I think definitely in terms of the Martin O'Neill one, there's a familiarity there, isn't there? And he'll bring that feel good factor back into the club when it's a difficult time for the club with Brendan Rodgers leaving, Martin O'Neill coming in, and then Wilfred Nancy coming in, and then him going out again. So yeah, he'll bring that feel good factor, which is an important one. I think in terms of the Chelsea continuation structure, Liam Rosenior is, I don't want to call him a company man in the sense that
but you're right though.
I mean, he coached at Strasbourg, and they're owned by Blue Co, which is the company that owned Chelsea. So it's a continuation. You know, we've spoken about whoever the new head coach is, he has to fit within that structure that Chelsea have created with multiple, seems quite a complicated structure, doesn't it? With multiple different sporting directors.
Yeah.
With different sort of job descriptions. And by the way, on the back end of the Club World Cup success, they all got 6-year contracts. So, you know, they're getting rewarded. They're obviously the people who've been credited with the success above the coach, perhaps. You know, that's an interesting talking point, isn't it? Liam Rosenior will come in and it'll be continuation. So I think you're absolutely right. I don't expect to see that spike in soft tissue injuries that we often see when there's a change in manager, because they're changing the playing style. I don't think they will. They're changing the training style. There will be subtle tweaks. Of course there are, because there'll be different drills that he wants to use that are different to Maresca's. But I think there'll be business as usual, a continuation of that, you know. So that'll be the Amorim one. There will be definitely, I think, a change in playing style there, because I think one of the reasons why he left was because he was so wedded to that formation.
Yeah,
that
3-4-3.
You know, yeah, it was, and it just wasn't working, was it? That was that idea of we speak quite regularly about this importance of a game model and a way of playing, and everybody being familiar with that and the importance of it, and how everything has to stems from that game model. You know, technically, are the players capable of playing the way the head coach wants to play? So if you're a direct team, you need players who are technically capable of delivering a direct pass or a long pass with accuracy. Physically, we've spoken quite broadly about how they need to be physically capable of playing the way the head coach wants to play. And, you know, that consistency in game model. But if the game model isn't working, which in this case, it clearly wasn't, then you've got to have that adaptability and flexibility to be able to make subtle changes to the tactics and to the system.
Yeah.
He was very, very clearly wedded to this way of playing. He changed it against Bournemouth, didn't he? And
ever so slightly.
Yeah, did they go but to a back four? But then against Wolves, he reverted back to that system, which surprised everybody. And then, I don't know if you watched that Wolves game, but it wasn't great.
It was not great. I was at the Bournemouth game, but I wasn't at the Wolves game, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the game. It was one of those ones where the game was on, but I wasn't really watching it.
Yeah,
It was because it wasn't exactly
diabolical.
exciting. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was poor. I was thinking, I'm glad I didn't pay money for this.
yeah,
Um, and that seems to be the one that probably brought everything to a head, where seemingly, if reports are to be believed, he was then challenged by the club hierarchy about his tactical game model. He then responded in a not positive way, then went into a press conference and said the comments that he said along the lines of, I wasn't brought here to be a coach, I was brought here to be a manager.
yeah.
But he did have that. He seemed quite a negative person from the time from the time he walked into the door 14 months earlier, didn't he?
Yeah, very defensive, wasn't he? Straight away, it was almost like I don't know whether I just don't know whether he was naive in thinking that the job wasn't going to be as difficult. That Manchester United weren't as big as he actually thought they were. That whoever the ex-players are who work in the media wouldn't be as vocal. They'd be more supportive. But the only way they'll support you and be alongside you is if you're winning games or whether you're showing something that makes you actually get behind them. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of naivety. I think he'll learn from it. But one thing you say there, and I think this is something that I just want to sort of move the chat forward a little bit because I thought this was interesting. And I'm going to catch you by surprise because this wasn't in our notes. Is Daniel Farker was very close a few weeks back to actually being sacked, or there was a lot of talk around it. And I just wanted your thoughts on he's changed the system midway through the season, and Leeds have actually picked up a couple of injuries off the back of it, and some big injuries, but they've
Yeah.
actually weathered it, got players back now. What would it be like if a manager came to you during the season and said that? How long are you giving the players to adapt within that season? I know we're talking about new managers coming in, but we're talking about the same manager here who's gone from a 4-3-3 to suddenly going to a 3-5-2.
Yeah, well, this is where data can be helpful. Data can be helpful because it could inform some decisions, and if you're not making decisions based on if you're not making physical decisions in training based on physical output data, then you're guessing, and
Yeah,
you can rely on instinct and how you interpret the data. So we use the GPS data, and one of the models that has been developed in order to change physical outputs with reduced risk of that change resulting in injuries is this thing called the acute chronic ratio model. So what we look at is we have 6 weeks of physical output data, and we call that the chronic physical profile. So of Stephen Warnock, over the course of the last 6 weeks, what does training look like on different days? What does match day look like for Stephen Warnock? So we've got this pretty dialed in. And then when we start to tweak these things, obviously the change in tactics and systems leads to a change in the physical demands that players have to produce, or the physical outputs that players have to produce in order to play that way. So one of the ways that we can look at, we talk about the threshold being within a certain percentage.
yeah,
And if we can say, okay, so if we look at a safe number, and we can look at, okay, Stephen Warnock this week typically he does 1,000 meters of high speed running. If we want to change that, and that change involves an increase in high speed running, then we need to look at an increase of this. And then we can set certain physical targets within the training program. And then when you hit those targets, then it's kind of right. We're now getting beyond a red zone. We're starting to be
yeah,
in the danger zone a little bit. And there can be, so monitoring the data, monitoring how that data is changing, ensuring the change isn't a spike or a dramatic
yeah. It's not
increase.
too radical.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an evolution throughout that process. So, yeah, Daniel Fark will have come to his staff and said, I'm going to change the way we're playing. I'm going to change the way we're training. There will be, I would imagine, a discussion around that in terms of what that change looks like.
Mm.
And then the performance staff will have gone away and evaluated the physical outputs that players have been producing in the previous 6 weeks. They'll have then set new physical targets in order to allow the players to adapt to this new way of playing in a more controlled and less dramatic way, which then leads to a spike of injuries.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that I approach it.
Is it quite an interesting one for you to have that during the season? It's a little bit of a change, a little bit of a challenge, and are you almost backing the manager going, yeah, can understand it. We're fully I know you've got to be fully behind the manager, otherwise
Yeah.
it doesn't work. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine it's more interesting anyway.
I mean, my view has always been that the manager, my job is to support the manager in whatever he wants to do. His job is to decide the way we play, and it's not my job.
Yeah.
My job is to provide players to the manager who are capable physically of doing what he wants them to do. You know,
Yeah.
so that and then
Is your head in your hands a little bit though at times, thinking we're going to have a few breaking down here, and you're thinking, shit, this is going to be a bit of an uncomfortable ride, or is it how you manage it as a sports scientist or a head of performance?
yeah, my approach, and this might be just me, was brilliant. This is a test of my knowledge and a test of my skill. This is why I'm here. We're
Yeah,
going to challenge the status quo. We're going to push performance upwards. Great, brilliant. Let's do it. Let's see how we can do it. You know, and let's, you know, if everyone's on board with it, with the trait in terms of, have I got a voice in the manager's office in terms of setting certain restrictions for certain players in training around that model and that change. Where your head comes in your hands is when you're not involved in the discussion. And
yeah,
then you think, I could have avoided these injuries from happening, or probably not avoided them is the wrong term, but I could have reduced the risk of them happening, and maybe one or two of them wouldn't have happened. So that's when your head goes in your hands. But when there is a change, the biggest challenge is when you're going into a club midway through a season, as I did when we came together at Blackburn, and again when I went into Sunderland, where you're trying to quickly establish what have these players been doing for the past couple of months, because you don't know, you haven't really seen it with your own eyes. So then you really got to be finding out by asking players, asking members of staff who've been in there, that's always a difficult one when you go into a club midway through a season, because a lot of staff are thinking, is this guy asking me this because my job's in jeopardy?
yeah.
And you know, the human aspect of it is really important, and the sort of getting what have we been doing? What does after a game look like? What have you been doing with that? What does the day after the game look like in terms of training? And not just looking down at the numbers, because the numbers tell us something, but the way in which the numbers have been generated is probably the most important thing. And
Yeah.
getting into that so that you can then quickly manage those players into a new way of playing as safely as possible. So that's an important one, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my cynical head on here. So when a new manager comes in, you've still got the same staff, and they start to do things differently, and all the players are like, "You never used to do this. Why have you suddenly changed?" And you're like, "Well, we've got to adapt. We've got to move forward. We've got to do something different." That's why the manager's essentially being sacked, because things haven't been going right, and everyone's going, "But why have you kept your job then?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then
You've got to
you
prove
mentioned
yourself
this.
again, haven't you?"
Well, you do, and you've got to stick to your principles, and you've got to stick to what you believe in. But at the same
Yeah.
time, you're working. The king is dead. Long live the king. There's a new king in town, right? So your job, you know, my job is to work for him. My job is to work for whoever the manager is, because that is going to hopefully drive the club forward. So if I'm doing something now that I didn't do 2 weeks ago, that doesn't necessarily mean that I didn't believe in it 2 weeks ago,
No.
but it didn't fit with what we were trying to do at that time, which is always headed up by the head coach. Now, we're talking about Chelsea, we're talking about Manchester United. It may be less headed up by the head coach and more by the sporting directors, and in terms of the way that we want to play. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, but you do managing that and I've done that one as well, when you remain a member of staff and a new manager comes in, and you've got to try and maintain your professionalism.
Yeah.
You've got to try and maintain the things that you believe in. You probably don't want to be going down the line of, oh, well, I don't believe in this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to keep my job.
Yeah.
Although that does
must be
enter.
difficult. Yeah.
Well, that does enter into it, doesn't it? You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
What you can't do is go to the players and criticise the head coach and the manager and say, this is a load of rubbish, but we're going to do it anyway because he wants to do it, because that's when cracks start emerging and then friction starts coming in, and then we're not all pulling in the same direction then.
Yeah. Right, we're done, Lammy. We've dissected everything that we think we can dissect today about the managerial bloodbath, as we called it. And that has been another episode of Strain on the Game. Follow us on social media and YouTube at Strain on the Game. Subscribe, like, and follow.